In this tutorial, we're going to be looking at how we can record our first track in Reaper. And you'll see here at the top that it's now a registered copy and I have my license. I mention that because there actually is VAT, which makes it $72. That's around about £59 at this moment in time, which again is still excellent value for this piece of software. So to record, we need to insert a track, and at the top here we have track, insert track. I can click and drag this down to make it larger on the screen, and let's see how we go, because the first thing we need to do is to arm the track. We're not actually setting the recording going, that's done down here on the transport bar, but at least it gives us a chance to see that we're not over peaking, and we need to be between minus 18 and minus 12 dB, and we are somewhere between that at the moment. So let's just make a recording. What I've done is reduce the sizes of the screens, should I say resize the software screens for my PDF reader and also for Reaper. And this is just one of the pages from a photography course that I created some time ago, and I'm just going to read that. There'll be mistakes in it, and then we'll just have a little bit of editing to do. So I'm going to arm the track now, or should I say arm the recording, by pressing here. And the waveform you can see appearing is my voice being recorded. So I'm going to just be quiet for a moment or two, and then I'll start reading. Depth of field. The way a subject is reproduced in a photograph can be very different from how it looked to you as you took the picture. When you cast your eye over a scene, everything in it seems to be more or less equally sharp, but sometimes in the finished shot, only part of the subject appears acceptably sharp. This zone of sharpness is called depth of field, and it extends in front of and behind the point that you actually focused on. The size of the zone is determined by three key factors: the aperture of the lens, the focal length of the lens used, and the distance you are from the subject. Varying these three elements allows you almost complete control over the depth of field in a picture. When most of the picture is sharp, we say there is a greater depth of field. When only part of the picture is sharp, we say we have only a narrow depth of field. The depth of field does not abruptly change from sharp to unsharp, but instead occurs as a gradual transition. In fact, everything immediately in front of or beyond the focusing distance begins to lose sharpness, even if this is not perceived by our eyes or by the resolution of the camera. Since there is no critical point of transition, a more rigorous term called the circle of confusion is used to define how much a point needs to be blurred. I'm finishing there because we're going off on a tangent. So we're now being asked to save. So let's just save all. And that's done there. We have overpeaked in certain areas. So we'll just have a look now how we can do some editing in this voiceover, we'll call it. Go back to the beginning, I'll fill the screen. Now here we have the preamble. Let me just disarm the recording. There we go. Now let's just have a look at this preamble. Just turn my speakers up a little bit, don't want them to feed back into the microphone. This is where headphones really come into their own, but we'll just have a little listen to this, and we'll play it by the transport bar. And the waveform you can see appearing is my voice being recorded. So I'm going to just be quiet for a moment or two, and then I'll start reading. Of course, we don't need that at all. So what we're going to do is to go to the beginning here, and we'll left click into the area, and I'm going to press the S key. Now that has split these two sections, so we can select the first part that we don't want, and if I press the delete key, it will get rid of it. I can now drag this right to the beginning, and if I press the go to the start of the project here on the transport bar, we'll get the cursor right back at the beginning. Let's see what happens next. Depth of field. The way a subject is reproduced in a photograph can be very different from how it looked to you as you took the picture. When you cast your eye over a scene, everything in it seems to be more or less equally sharp, but sometimes in the finished shot, only part of the subject appears acceptably sharp. This zone of sharpness is called depth of field, and it extends in front of and behind the point that you actually focused on. The size of... Okay, so we've a mistake there, and you can see these two lines here. Now, they were created by using a dog clicker. I've been on many of the YouTube channels, and lots of recorders use this particular method. It's simply a clicker, and it creates a very obvious point in the recording where we've got an error. So let's just have a look at this. That was wrong, and we want it to flow into this next part. So if I take the cursor here by clicking into it, S splits it, and if I take it here and press the S, we split again. What I can do is to delete this section here, and I have the facility now to drag this along to this point here, and hopefully we're not too far off. Let's just play that little bit again. And behind the point that you actually focused on. The size of the zone is determined by 3, so that's just about right. But there is another way that we can do this. So if I press Ctrl Z and Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z, if I let's see if I can do that again. Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z. Yeah, we're back to where we were. There is another way, and I did mention, or I may have mentioned, the ripple editing. Now at this moment in time it's disabled, and it's this little multi-boxed window up here, this icon here, that will allow us to do what is called ripple editing. And if I select that, and now I put my splits in there, split there, and a split there using the S key, select the bit in the middle. If I delete it now, you'll see that the ripple editing causes it to come together and give us the spacing that we wanted in the first place. So that's one thing that is extremely useful in a continuous speech. So let's just go a little bit further. Let's see where we go from there. Determined by 3 key factors: the aperture of the lens, the focal length of the lens used, and the distance you are from the subject. Varying these 3 elements allows you almost complete control over the depth of field in a picture. When most of the picture is sharp, we say there is a greater depth of field. When only part of the picture is sharp, we say we have only a narrow depth of field. Okay, so we've got another fault there, me coughing. Actually, at the time I'm recording, I've been suffering from one of these chesty coughs for long enough, but you'll have to forgive the voice. So what I can do now is the same thing. Split there, and I can select this part, delete it, and again it's all joined together as a single piece of track. Now I've obviously got another problem here. Let's see what that was. Let's play it and see. But instead occurs as a gradual transition. In fact, everything immediately in front of or beyond In fact, everything immediately in front of, okay, we see that. I think we start it somewhere here. Let me just play it. In fact, everything immediately in front of or beyond. In fact, everything immediately. Okay, so I need to get rid of this section here. Move the cursor, the playhead. Now, one of the things you'll see that the playhead is jumping between these this grid here. So if I try and move it just a little bit, it's quite difficult. It just tends to jump from one to the other because there is a grid here, and also the snapping, quite like a lot of programs that do have this. So what we're going to do is to options, and if we have a look down in options, we have that enable snapping. Well, I'm going to deselect that. I'll go to options again, and snap and grid. Let's get rid of the grid because we don't need that. It's useful for people who are processing music, but for us there's no need for it, so let's get rid of it. And in fact, that looks a wee bit better. Right, now it should be easy just to move the cursor along somewhere there, and S to split, and again here the cursor to here, S to split, select the bit in the middle, delete, and we have what we should have had in the first place, but instead occurs as a gradual transition. In fact, everything immediately in front of or beyond the focusing distance begins to lose sharpness, even if this is not perceived by our eyes or by the resolution of the camera. Okay, so what we can do, and at this point I need to tell you that the whole of this is the track. These individual items that we've placed there are just that, and they are referred to as items, and you can see that we can do things with the items in this tab here on the top menu bar. So the whole of the recording can comprise of a number of items wherever we go. Let's just bring the size of that down so we can see where we've been. If I select the minus key, then I can reduce the size of the overall recording. If I press the plus key, I can expand it so that it gives us more room to edit at a later stage. So these are items, they are all items. Let's get back to some more. That's one there, I think. Yeah, so we've got a number of items here. We've got one, two, three, 4 items. Now, because I've got ripple editing on, now I've positioned them, and I want you to imagine that this is an audio visual. That's why we're doing it for a slideshow, that we want to start the voiceover a short way into the slideshow. Having explained something or told a part of a story, we want the images to take over, and then we'll say something else, and so on. Now, once we've set these distances, and we can do this in Reaper, if we have ripple editing on, then they are set in those distances, and you can see that everything beyond the one that I've selected will move with it. If I select this one, everything beyond that will move with it, and we're able to set up these things and allow the timing to remain the same. Providing we've got things right, then all we need to do is to save the recording again, and then we can render it, which is the final process. And there's just one final thing that I'd like to show you. The fact that we have cut sections out doesn't mean to say that it's disappeared. It's actually still there, not only on that side, but on that side as well. And so unless we actually glue, which we may look at later, glue these pieces together, then it's non-destructive and the information is still there. So that if we actually cut something out, moved it out of the way, cut it out, then it still remains there. And this is just another excellent feature of this piece of software. So hopefully That's made a start to how we can record our first track, but there's an awful lot more that we can do, and we can make this process easier by customizing the software for our own use, and that will be the subject of our next tutorial.